Joining us now is our weekly strategy panel. Richard Mahoney is a Liberal commentator. Tim Powers is a Conservative commentator. Kim Wright is a commentator with the NDP. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
So a lot to talk about, beginning with the Ontario Premier. Richard, the Prime Minister, he was asked whether he thinks Doug Ford should testify before the Commission. Now, the Prime Minister did not give his opinion on that. Instead, he pointed to the good working relationship he has with the Ontario Premier. But how complete can the inquiry's work really be without Doug Ford actually testifying?
I don't think it can be that complete because the inquiry is into the Emergencies Act. By virtue of the legislation, we have to have an inquiry into whether the act was justified, whether the invoking of the emergency was justified, whether things worked, if they didn't work. So there's a lot of data in front of us, but one of the things we're looking at is how did the police forces respond? Why did it take so long? All that sort of stuff. Well, the senior police force in the jurisdiction is the Ontario Provincial Police. We've had a lot of evidence in the inquiry right now about what the OPP did do and what they didn't do. How could Mr. Justice Rouleau's work be complete without the head of government of the most senior police force in Ontario? And you could say, well, the RCMP are a senior police force too. Yes, but their jurisdiction is only in the federal precinct. So, yeah, we have to know that. And I think there's a lot of politics in this. I think it's served Doug Ford's interest to not have any of his, fingerprints on the convoy and the Emergencies Act. And he's gotten off, pretty scot-free on this, whereas the Prime Minister has got lots of accountability, the Mayor of Ottawa, the police force is there due. But we can't know whether this worked, whether it didn't work. We can't know what to do next time without the or the Solicitor General, I should say, of Ontario, and the Premier testifying and agreeing to testify in the same way the Prime Minister has, in the same way Ministers Blair, and so forth have.
Yeah, well, let me jump in, Tim, because, I am wondering about, Richard's referencing some politics in this, and I am wondering about the calculus. Why is Doug Ford so reluctant here when he was not hesitant at all just last week, saying that he stood shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister in invoking the Emergencies Act?
Well, Michael, he hasn't told me on our daily calls. Being facetious, I don't talk to Doug Ford.
He should.
Well, I think he's got better people to talk to than me. As you say, there's probably some current local politics that's influencing this, and some people in the Conservative Party weren't necessarily big fans of the invocation of the Emergencies Act and or all things associated with that. That aside, I think he should testify. I think he would perform well. He does well in these sorts of circumstances. And I think the story that he's told publicly so far fits well with understanding what has happened here. I don't think it's essential that for the overall findings of the inquiry that he testifies, but I think he's missing an opportunity by not testifying. And now as a consequence of that, it does look like he has something to hide, and that's not helpful to him.
And Kim, what do you make of it?
Look, from knowing the Premier, knowing how, having watched him under a question period, but also Toronto City Council, I would say this: he'd be great on the first question. It'll be the 6th and 7th and 8th question that he'll start to lose his temper a little bit. And if I were I wouldn't go there either. Now, saying that, from a citizen perspective, from a gathering the information perspective, he and the now Deputy Premier, Sylvia Jones, should be on the stand, should be giving testimony, so we understand how to use this in a better light. But from a pure politics perspective, absolutely, I would never advise Premier Ford and Sylvia Jones to go on this. Now, they should, but we look to other inquiries, and there is a difference between this is an inquiry versus a royal commission. And for all of us, we'll call it charitably nerds on this panel, we understand that there is a difference in compelling him to, big difference in compelling him to get back on that stand, to get onto that stand. But we're not going to see that. And we can be mad about it, but this is not like the Walkerton inquiry. This is not like other inquiries that we saw in Ontario that were really challenges legally, but also of the then Premier's own making. So again, I would like to see him do it, but I guarantee his staff are like, absolutely not.
Okay. Well, we'll keep watching that situation, but I do need to move on here because we're quickly losing time. I want to talk as well about what we heard from the Bank of Canada governor just this past week. Of course, interest rates gone up again as we are hearing complaints about Canadians who are already hurting. A quick go-around here. Is there a desire, is there room for the federal government to use fiscal policy to help Canadians who right now are not happy with these rising interest rates? Richard, I'll ask you to start us off.
I think the answer to that, Michael, is yes. I mean, first of all, we've seen some measures the government has already taken on this front. The help for families with dental care, which starts this year and will expand to cover all age groups by the end of it, is a big part of that. The $500 rent.
But is there anything? But is there anything more than that, though?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, it's not up to me to say that, but my opinion is this, there'll be a fiscal statement in the fall and a budget in the spring, and I would wager that you're right. There'll be more measures in those two things because inflation affects every income group, every age group right across the country, takes earnings out of people's pockets. I think there isn't, as the Minister Freeland said recently, there isn't unlimited kitty for all this. We spent a lot of money as a country in recovering from the pandemic. But yeah, if I had to predict, and if you put me on the spot as you just did, I suspect there'll be more measures in the upcoming economic statement to be sometime next month or so.
Okay. Tim, what do you think?
Well, there's one obvious measure that not just Poilievre is calling for, but other premiers are calling for, and you could follow in line with the doubling of the GST rebate. You could pause the application of the carbon tax for 6 months. That may provide some immediate relief to people. All across the country today, people's gas prices were going up, so that's not helping them if you have to drive a car. So there's one measure. They voted against it. The government did this week. I don't think they'll do it, but it's one that could be very helpful to many.
Okay, Kim?
So there's a couple of things I see. One of the things I would say, look back to what the Harper government did in 08-09 in terms of infrastructure build-outs. There's lots of roads that need to be repaired. There are lots of schools and public housing that needs to be built. Doing this in a meaningful way and not making the same mistake the Harper government made, which was making the municipalities shell out the money first and then getting kind of hosed on the interest rates on the back end. But there are lessons to be learned about how do you weather an economic storm. And really it is looking to your partners and delivery agents to have a better sense of this. It can't just all be tax policy. People want to see their communities moving and growing again. And frankly, the housing stock needs to get built in every town and city in this country. So let's get on with it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. As Tim says, the economic update not that far down the road, so we will speak again. But for now, Richard, Tim, and Kim, thank you for that.
Thanks, Michael.